Welcome to your Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast. Sarah and I are bringing you season 3, and we couldn't be more excited. Sarah, it's so good to be here with you back for season 3 of our podcast.
I know. Can you believe it? 3 seasons.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about our guest for today. Would you like to tell people who we're talking to today?
Yes, absolutely. Today we get to have a conversation with Karli Von Herbulis. She is a friend of Velvet Ashes. She's one of our writers. I love that I get to interact with her in that way, getting to see and share her words and her heart. She's in Rwanda, and we get to hear some of her story of how she got there and the work that she is doing right now with her family. So many good nuggets of wisdom from Karli in this conversation.
And what I love about our conversation with Karli is that she sits with us in a lot of different spaces. She sits with us in our Velvet Ashes community, but she's also been with us in other places. Like
Mm-hmm.
she was with us at our first in-person retreat in Italy, and she shares with our community her unfiltered opinion of what that was like and describes a little bit of it. And I'm really excited because we are opening a chance for our community to join us again. There's 24 spots. If you are listening to this when it comes out in August,
Right.
that we are opening to the public to join us for another in-person retreat this coming May 2025, May 5th through the 8th. We're going back to Tuscany. So if you are considering maybe joining us there, listen to this podcast and hear what Karli has to say about her experience of joining us in
Yeah.
2023.
Well, and even if by the time you listen to this, registration is closed or spots are filled up, be following in the Velvet Ashes community, because we want this to be part of our yearly rhythms, is being able to gather in person. So follow along, if you don't have the opportunity to go this time.
And, one other thing, just talking about our yearly rhythms and what we would like to invite you into, we are having our very first Equip conference. I'm so excited about this. We haven't done this before, so you get to be a part of experiencing this with us. But one of the things that Karli talks about is just wanting to be with people with what they really need as a cross-cultural woman.
The
And
super practical.
yes. And we felt like that was something we haven't always had a great avenue to deliver to our community, was those really practical things. And so the Equip conference is that. We want people to feel seen. We want them to feel known. We want them to feel challenged. And so we have invited 3 amazing keynote speakers who wanted so badly to show up for you here in this space. Jenny Allen, Katie Davis Majors, Mektis Haddis. They aren't just speaking to anybody. They are speaking directly to you, to women in our community who serve cross-culturally. They are coming with words of encouragement. And we are bringing you 12 workshops by professionals in their field about things that are practical, that you experience and need to be equipped with as you live as a cross-cultural woman. So look for more information coming out about that. Registration opens here in this month, August as well. August 15th, you can register to be a part of this online conference, October 24th through the 26th. Lots of great things for you if you can't join us live. But if you can, there's going to be some live elements where you get to interact with your community, but also with these experts on these topics that are relevant to you. So be looking for more information and registering for that conference with us. One other thing I wanted to talk about is just, Sarah, can we talk a little bit about what can people expect in season 3 of the Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast?
We have heard from so many of you how much the legacy stories, the stories of women from the past, have really meant to you. And so we want to bring you more of those. We love these conversations like with Karli, where we get to hear from our sisters who are also just walking through, real time life on the field, or we have the opportunity to hear from them live. We don't get that, with so many of the legacy stories where it would be lovely to sit down with them over a cup of coffee, and we can't do that. And so we want to bring you both of those things, those conversations with women who are walking through the joys and the challenges of this cross-cultural life, or can speak to a particular topic that we know is relevant for you. But we also really want to highlight and make sure we are bringing you these legacy stories as well.
So look forward to season 3. We're bringing you more legacy stories, more of what you love here from your community of women all over the world at Velvet Ashes. One of the things we also wanted to mention as you go into listening to this podcast today is that we do record with women who are always on the verge of potentially their power and internet going out. And so we just ask that you bear with us for potentially any sound issues or glitches that you might have, knowing that women are wanting to bring you their stories from less than ideal setups to record a podcast. And so you might hear some of those today in Karli's talk with us, but we're doing our best to clean it up so that it becomes a clear podcast. And we think that no matter what, even if you have to deal with a little interference, it's totally worth the listen. With every podcast that we bring you from women who are recording from all over the world. And we just want to thank Barnabas International for making this a possibility, for allowing us to bring you these conversations, for sponsoring this podcast. We're so grateful for them. And we're so excited for you to hear what Karli has to say. Here's your Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast. Karli, thank you so much for being with us today. You are just
thanks for having me.
Dear friend. I know it's so fun when I was thinking about sitting with you today. It's like, it's a dear friend sitting here having coffee who I would want to have coffee with anyway. And
right.
we just get to do it virtually with all of our friends and sisters all over the world and just catch up. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And I feel the same way. Like we've worked together like this in a couple of different capacities. And yeah, I've just been really excited to be here and just chat with you guys.
So for anyone listening that maybe isn't familiar with you, your ministries, what you're up to, let's just start at the beginning. Let's just talk about who Karli Von Herbulis is and why you are serving as a woman cross-culturally.
Ooh, that is a whole entire journey that we could take. And we could take it. But yeah, my name is Karli. And I am a mother of 2. I have a daughter, Hallie, who's 10, and a son, Shepherd, who is 7. I've been married to my husband, Matthew, for 15 years, and we've been in Rwanda for about 8.5. So over half of our marriage now, which feels like a big milestone, actually. Yeah.
Where were you at before?
Yeah. So we immediately before coming here, we were in Waco, Texas, doing a training there. My husband works in sustainable agriculture and farming. That's kind of what brought us over here to Rwanda. So he was doing a training there in Texas. But before that, we lived in Maryland, which is where my family is, and then Florida, which is where my husband's family is, and where we went to university.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Maryland to Texas, that's quite a culture shock.
Yeah. We had, in some ways, it softened the blow of moving abroad, I think, for us, because we moved from living just a couple miles away from my family, and my daughter was 5 months old, to moving to Texas, where we literally had not met anyone. We moved into a 600 square foot apartment that did not have a flushing toilet. We made a composting toilet out of a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket that we put a toilet seat on top of, and we filled with wood chips. And so when the director of our team here came to visit us after we had decided to go to Rwanda, he visited us there and he said, "Oh, you're going to have no problem living in Rwanda."
That is so funny. Okay.
Yeah.
My husband also tried to do the composting toilet bit and like convinced me that was the way to go. And I was like, I would prefer not, but you did it.
We did it. I feel like I could do it if it wasn't for the bugs. And it's not bugs like flies, because it is relatively clean if you have a good system. It's the spiders that get in there and kind of make it their home, and then you got to wipe it out before you do your thing, or I don't like spiders, so that just didn't feel great. But when it was in our house, it was actually inside our house, and then when it got full, my husband just had to take out the bucket and go dump it, and that was his chore, and I did all the other chores.
Okay, so in theory, that is called a composting toilet because you would use that then to fertilize things in the future. Did that really happen?
So I'm trying to remember exactly how they did it at this farm, because this whole farm complex that we were on, there were like 30 or 40 people living on this complex at any given time, mostly singles. We had one of the only like married housing complexes, and the entire farm was composting toilets, and they would call it humanure. Uh-huh.
Mm.
But it wouldn't go on anything that was going to be eaten by
Okay.
people.
Okay.
So they wouldn't take it and put it on like the tomato beds. They would take
Okay.
it and put it like where there's fodder that they're going to feed the cattle, maybe. I'm not going to say that definitively. I was very far removed from that process. Besides being a
Right.
source of humanure, I was really not involved.
That is so it sounds like maybe you have moved on from composting toilets in Rwanda?
I sure have. Yeah. We
Yeah.
have one on our farm that's like for guests. We allow people to come and camp on our farm, and so
Mhm,
there's
mhm.
one for guests to use. But when we built our home here, I was like, absolutely not. We will
Yeah.
not have that. Just
Yeah.
I have to be able to go in peace and comfort in my
And
own
not worry
home.
about the spiders.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I get
Yep.
it.
Yep.
I I was, in a situation in the States before we left where it was also like, "Hey, I might be moving up to move to Africa in our, like, bathroom
Right.
situation," and so, yeah, I get that. Um, okay, so what is it that you and your husband do in Rwanda now?
Yeah. So my husband is still working in sustainable agriculture and discipleship. They work through local churches, equipping the churches to do discipleship groups within the local farmer population. So he now is partnered with an organization called Hope International,
Oh,
which
yeah.
some of you may know. It's based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they do really fantastic work with savings groups. And they now are kind of adding in an agricultural element, and they decided to bring my husband's program in to be a part of that. So it's been a huge gift to be able to partner with Hope, and that's what my husband does. I have a lot of hats I wear right now, Denise. It's
Mhm.
kind of exhausting, to be completely
Mm.
honest with you. Um, but this is where walking in faith and obedience has gotten me, and that's okay. And I trust that when it needs to slow down, it will. Um, I am the English service coordinator for our church. So I help plan all of the services. I make sure the volunteers are where they need to be. I'm the one who is making sure that there's someone preaching and leading worship. I also am on the preaching team, which is very fun and very new. I have never been a part of a congregation where a woman was allowed to do that. And I know that listeners are going to land in different spaces
Mhm,
for that,
mhm.
and that is okay. But it's been a really interesting thing for me to get to serve in that way.
How is that received where you're at?
You know, Rwanda is a really interesting place because they really outwardly value women's leadership quite a bit. There's lots of women in
Mhm.
parliament. The Rwandan Anglican Church is happy to ordain women pastors. Women socially are still not, I don't want to say they're not seen as equal citizens, but it is, times are still difficult for women here. You know, there's still a lot of domestic abuse. There's still,
Yeah.
women's roles are quite different than men's roles. So the equality picture that you could get by looking at parliament stats and seeing, oh, there's like more women than men in parliament, that's great. But the trickle down to the average woman and how she, experiences her life at home is quite
Mhm.
slow. But I felt really privileged to have our Rwandan priests of our church, we go to an Anglican church, ask me and invite me in to be part of the preaching team, especially given that in many American churches that I have been a part of, that would not have been an option for me or an
Yeah.
invitation for me. So
Yeah.
it's been interesting to see even just the different opportunities that have come from serving in that way.
Wow. So, in addition to mom and English coordinator and on the preaching team,
Mm-hmm.
um, we are familiar with you because of the work that you did. How many years ago did you begin Third Culture Thriving?
Yeah, it was 2019, late 2019, that I just started a Instagram page without a whole lot of direction, just kind of saying like, I wonder what it would be like to have some conversations about living abroad. And it was right around the same time that I was introduced to Velvet Ashes, and saw that you all were facilitating some of the same conversations. And I mean, I think pretty soon after that, we connected at some point
Yes.
too.
Well, you know
Um,
what I think it was in 2020, and we felt like, oh my goodness, the world is needing a little more real-time conversations because
mhm,
2020 was crazy for everyone. And so we
mhm.
started doing these things called Summer Lives.
Yes.
And we reached out to you and it's like, hey, you want to hop on and just do live calls and chat with
Yes.
us? And so
Yep.
I think that maybe is the first time that we actually chatted together. And
Yep. I
it
think
was
that's right.
Third Culture Thriving was beginning, and
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Yeah, because
so
I had just done the furlough planner, and
yes,
I think
yes.
that's what we talked about some on that call as well.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
talk a little bit about what you were seeing and, what was, overflowing into Third Culture Thriving as meeting needs for those around you.
sure. I mean, it starts further back, right? It starts with my own story of moving abroad.
Mhm.
We came to Rwanda sight unseen. I came as a pregnant, trailing spouse. I wasn't going to really have a whole lot to do with my husband's ministry. We knew that. I don't have the same skill set that he does. My hope at that point was to eventually train to become a midwife, but that very quickly became something that wasn't going to be super possible here. And I just really, really struggled. I really struggled. My anxiety was through the roof. I was having panic attacks multiple times a week, just very depressed. But I really believed in my husband's mission.
Mm.
And so I remember saying to a colleague of ours, our regional director, which I'll come back to him because he's pivotal in this story too. I remember saying to him, "This is fine. I hate living here. I'm not happy, but I love my husband's ministry and I believe in it so deeply that if this is what my life needs to look like and this is the cross that I am called to bear, I will do it."
Mm.
And I mean, I had resigned, and there was a surrender about that I still admire. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that the Lord kind of led me to that place along the journey. But my regional director said to me, "That's fine that you feel like you're okay with that, but I'm not okay with that. And I'm not okay with you continuing to hate your life here. I'm not okay with you continuing to be unhealthy. And even if you think that you can live this way in perpetuity, I know enough to know that you can't. And you're going to hurt your ministry and your husband's ministry if
Mhm.
you stay." So he basically said, "You either need to get help and make changes and get healthy, or you need to come off the field." And he basically gave us an ultimatum.
Wow. How many years into this was it that you were having these
Yeah, it
conversations?
was about 3. It was
Okay.
about 3. Actually, almost exactly 3. So that summer, which was the summer of 2019, to put in perspective, then when Third Culture Thriving started, we went back to the US for an extended amount of time, did a lot of counseling. I did some EMDR therapy to help with some of the traumas that I had witnessed. And yeah, we did therapy both together and separately, did some debriefing, and also decided, you know what, we need a better car that's safer for us, and we need to move to a neighborhood that's safe where we haven't witnessed the trauma that we did in our last neighborhood,
Mm.
and we need to raise our budget so that we can afford to eat healthy food and not just different forms of carbohydrates for every meal. And we did those things, and we were very honest with our supporters. We were upfront with the struggles we were having, and we came back and it felt like a switch flipped, and things have just been so much better since then, so much better. But we could have left. That would have been the end of my husband's ministry, that now they have 20,000 farmers in his discipleship program. Third Culture
Wow.
Thriving could have never existed, and we could never be having this conversation, right? And it's easy for me to see it just through my perspective of my family and my story. But what really tipped the scales for me in terms of wanting to create and wanting to share and wanting to facilitate these conversations was I was seeing people leave for these same
Mm.
reasons. People that had beautiful ministries, people that were doing really important work here, people that were doing really important work in other countries and just didn't have the support in one way or another to thrive where the Lord had called them. And I believe in the Lord's sovereign hand over their life and their ministry. But I also think that we, as people serving abroad, people serving abroad, it's our job to look and say, how can we do better for these people? And often what I saw was that it was the woman struggling in that equation. And I know that that is so much of your heart behind Velvet Ashes as well.
So much, yes.
So I kind of just got to a point where I wanted to create what I didn't have, and for me, I saw Velvet Ashes and you all create such beautiful retreat guides and you have connection groups. I see like Taking Root, and they've done great things with language learning, and they have great conversations on their podcast. And I felt like I needed practical, quick, somehow encouraging, but somehow also going to equip me to do this better. Things like some kind of guide to help me hire domestic staff, because no one walked me through that and it was a disaster.
Oh my
Something to
goodness,
help,
yes.
something to help with furlough planning, something to help with, like goal setting as a person living here, like trying to cook meals, things that were very tangible, very day to day, that just don't look the same for us as they do for women who aren't serving abroad. And so that was where Third Culture Thriving was born, was kind of out of that overflow of my own learning and wanting to equip women with that learning as well.
So I kind of want to jump back real quick. You talked about I forget what you called him, your field coordinator or your
the regional director.
Regional director. It seems like he was really pivotal in this absolute 180 that was able to happen. Would you say he was really kind of pivotal in that role?
Yeah, he really was. I mean, again, I had really resigned myself to, this is what my life is going to look like. And he was the one that said, no, I'm not okay with that. I had said before that I wanted to come back to him in the story. And so the full circle with him is that I now am a regional director for our sending agency. So
Okay.
I am now in that role for other affiliates that are working in Africa, which is just the greatest joy for me. So if you've seen the traveling that I've been doing, most of that is because of this. So it's my job to support our other affiliates that are serving in Africa, make sure that they're okay, make sure that they have the budgets they need, the resources they need, that they are well, and that they are able to stay where the Lord has called them. And I get to go visit them and really do that work with them, just like Phil visited me. So I have a very special place in my heart for him, because first of all, I don't think we would be on the field without him and his intervening. And then secondly, he then, has mentored me into this position that I find myself in now.
Well, and I feel like when you were talking about that season in your life, I can't help but think about the women who have the earphones in their ears right now, listening to this and feeling like, I am there right now. And where is my guy? Where is somebody that's going to notice this and say, I'm not okay with you being here, and walk you through that. And honestly, the reality of why Velvet Ashes exists, why you were so passionate about Third Culture Thriving, is because not everybody has that guy to say, I'm not okay with you not being okay. And so creating resources or conversations at the very least around there are things that you can do. And I wonder if just for a minute you could talk to those women who don't have that guy. Like, what are some of the things that they could do? Play anti-regional director to everyone.
Yeah, sure.
What would you say to women right now who are struggling like that?
I think that you suffering is not good for anyone. It's not good for you, and no one wants to see you suffer. But it also is not to the benefit of your family. It's not to the benefit of your ministry. It's not, your supporters don't want to see you suffer. But it's easy to think, I shouldn't complain. this is what we chose. I knew what I was getting into. I need to continue to pour myself out for my family and my ministry. And it just doesn't work that way. Like, that's not what the Lord desires for us. He desires so much better for us. I think if you don't have an organization that really is supportive and encouraging in that way, or you don't have someone in that role that is able to check up on you, there really are a lot of resources online. And I feel like it's more and more every year that are coming out. Velvet Ashes has spiritual directors, and that's a great place to start. Thrive Ministries has several different like coaching and mentoring and counseling resources as well. There's Vallejo that offers counseling. The first step is just reaching out and getting help. And if you need to reach out to me, if you need to reach out to Denise or Sarah, we will help you find that help, because we desire that for you. So if you don't have that person, I'll be that person for you, or we'll be that person for you. But you burning yourself out on the field is not accomplishing what the Lord put you there to do. And that's not what the Lord desires for you. It's just not. He desires health for you and wholeness. And sometimes that means walking through really, really difficult things. I think we all have been through really difficult things on the field. But he desires health and wholeness for you.
Well, and I'd like to acknowledge, like, you are ministering from a third world country. Well, is Rwanda still considered a third world country? I know that.
I think it is. Yeah. It's quite developed for Africa. The capital is, but yeah, it is still a developing nation for sure.
And yet I was on a call with a husband who was serving in Italy, and his wife was absolutely spiraling and going through very similar things. Like, it is not, relegated to struggling to survive physically locations. And he was like, she talked about committing suicide, and I am sitting here with a thriving ministry going, how can we stay? And this was before really Velvet Ashes and things like all the resources you just mentioned were really big on the scene. And he's just pleading with me, please don't stop. Like, husbands value the work that you're doing to help provide for our wives, no matter what type of, location. Women can still struggle, even if it's not in Africa, and so absolutely. I'm so grateful that we are living in an age where this is something we can talk about. And there are lots of places that you can turn to for as little as listen to a podcast once a month, be encouraged to know that you are not alone, and feel the camaraderie of sisters all over the world who are saying, I so struggled with this. And there's hope. I'm doing better. You can be too. That too. We actually do need to take some time off of the field. We need to go and get some counseling, shore up our resources together. And that doesn't mean that your time is over. Sometimes maybe it does, but it doesn't have to, right?
Yep.
And so, okay, so your journey through all of this not only birthed third culture thriving, but it also equipped you to be able to speak in your current role as regional director, right? Because nobody likes to sit across from somebody who has no idea what they're actually talking about. And so
very true.
So all of that, and no matter how difficult it was a gift to prepare you to sit across from people and immediately feel like, I know what you're going through and I can talk with you. And so I even just want to say to women who are going through this right now, I know it sounds cliche, but you have to do those things sometimes in order to be more effective and to be heard in what the Lord has for you next. So be encouraged, just like to keep walking where he has you walking. But I want to get back to Karli. So third culture thriving really was meaningful and is meaningful to a lot of women, because those are the practical things that we do need. But talk a little bit about even where that has gone and your journey with producing content for that.
Sure. Yeah, about a year ago, I started just just wondering what the Lord was doing in that space. I had had a lot of dreams for it that I felt like I needed to put on the back burner for whatever reason. I had been asked into a couple other different opportunities, one of them being to serve as a regional director. And I just wasn't sure what third culture thriving was supposed to be. It's very hard for me to exist in a space without a trajectory or without like something that I'm working towards, right? So yes, it's always been a podcast. Yes, there's been resource creation, but I've always thought it's going to grow into this thing or it's going to grow into this thing. And I just didn't have that clarity. So I decided to stop for a while. It wasn't super planned. There were other things taking up my time, but I just knew that I needed to set it down and kind of enter into a season of discernment, but also just a little bit of hibernation. Felt like the Lord was doing some internal things with me, internal healing, things that I needed to journey through without commodifying my own healing journey. You know, when you create content, there's a very short line between the Lord doing something in your heart and then you needing to kind of package it for mass consumption. At least that's the easiest route to usually take with content creation. And I just felt like, okay, it's time to winter a bit. It's time to grow the roots deeper and not have things be so outward. But I entered into this summer. So this is, fast forwarding 6 or 8 months, just saying like, what do I do? Do I shut the podcast down? I don't know, like, how is this supposed to exist? And I just held it with really open hands. And there were multiple moments over the last several months as I kind of asked these questions where the podcast kept coming up in conversation. A friend in Beijing said, oh, I got to share your podcast with a new friend that I met here, and it was so helpful for her. Or, people leaving the field in India, using a guide that was able to help them, or even like people who just moved here to Kigali, me being able to send her like, here's a couple episodes on how to hire house help. And this is like, you're asking me these questions. I've actually already written this. Let me send it to you. And I just felt a confirmation that the podcast is still a living, breathing thing, that the Lord still has something in it to do. And I don't know what that will look like yet, but it is, the podcast is going to come back. I am not exactly sure of the date. It should be mid-August. Let me just look at my phone because I actually can tell you.
Absolutely.
It will be August 19th will be the day that it comes back.
The return of Third Culture Thriving Podcast.
Yes. Very exciting. And it's just going to be a podcast. And that's okay. Like, it's a podcast. It's a lot of work to do a podcast. You guys know this.
Yes.
But I'm excited to continue having those conversations, and maybe there will be new resources that come up. I don't know. We'll see. But I am grateful for the ways that when I took the time to discern, when I took the time to hold it out to the Lord and say, where do you want me to lay this? He just affirmed like, no, this is still yours, and there's still work to be done in this space.
I love that. We're so grateful for Third Culture Thriving and for your voice in speaking to women. And so we're glad to see that it's coming back.
Thanks.
And to see what the Lord has for that. I want to go back to one thing that you said about not commodifying the process. I feel like that's something that is a consideration that we have to take now. Like it wasn't something that maybe 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, people who were going through things were like thinking, okay, do I post about this? Do you journey with me? How transparent do I be in this process? But now I think that's a real struggle to know, when is it something that I'm just going to journey with my 1,000, 2,000, however many, followers on social media, journey with me through this. And when do I pull back and say, no, this is this is just for me. And
Yeah.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how do you discern, not only when you're going through something, but how do you discern what to be transparent with and share, and what do you hold close as a woman serving cross culturally?
Mm, yeah. Well, and it's that that question becomes even more complicated if you're support raising, right?
Hmm.
Because I think when you're support raising, you also are expected to show up online in a certain way.
Yep.
You're expected to have a certain amount of transparency, or it goes the opposite direction and you're actually expected to show up a certain way that if you're transparent, it might actually ruin that. And stories that are not ours, how do we share those? This is a
Hmm.
ethical sharing of stories is a whole
Absolutely.
other podcast episode. But I think for me, the way that this journey has worked has been, I felt very clearly like it was time to hunker down and these
Mm.
things were not to be shared. And there was a piece within it that I just couldn't shake. And now, and this has kind of coincided now with, I'm starting to record episodes now that will be launched in the fall. And it's coincided with this, that now I feel a very distinct shift to share. And it's just a knowing. It's just a knowing that when I get really still with myself, I know, just like I knew in that stillness that it wasn't time to share the things that the Lord was doing. Now, in that same stillness, I find myself with an energy to share these things that wasn't there before. And I think that's the Spirit's leading. And I think we really can't, I wish there was a magical equation that we could say, you should share these things if it meets these different requirements, or if it's not this thing, you shouldn't share it. It's going to be different person to person, right? And sharing comes with risk, and we're going to be willing to take different risks because we're, wired differently.
Well, and I think that that's also, some of us are just wired to be more introverted, and the idea of a constant running story that shares every moment,
Mm,
that would be wrong for me, because that's not who I
sure.
am in general. But there are other people that I am so grateful that that is the way that they live their life, and I can journey with
Mm,
them in that way.
mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a good point to bring out as well, is like there is no formula for this is the perfect way you
Mm,
live as a cross-cultural worker. That we are it's extensions of who God created us to be, and that
yeah.
there are spaces for
Mm,
that as well.
mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about is there's other connections that we had, and I'm looking. Those of you that are listening can't see this, but Karli has behind her in her little office this beautiful drawing of Florence, which is a city that we both love, and we got to cross paths in because you
Mm,
came to our very first in-person Velvet Ashes retreat. And
mm-hmm.
that was, I remember when you were, letting us know that you were coming, that was a part of your exploring third culture thriving, and maybe where was God going to lead it. And you were beginning another journey in spiritual direction as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that time? And we would love for you to just share your experience as a part of one of our in-person retreats, because the in-person retreat is happening again in 25, and people can register to
Mm.
be a part of that experience. And so I would love for you to just share a little bit about that.
Yes, I would love to share. I would love to share. Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the visions that I had for the culture thriving was to put on in-person retreats, and rather than them being destination retreats like yours in Italy and like what some other organizations do, I wanted to travel to communities and do, a Kigali, Rwanda third culture thriving retreat and work within an existing community of people to bring them together. So it was slightly different. But one of the ways that I was thinking about doing, kind of formulating what that retreat would look like, was I did research and I went to a Thrive retreat. I went to your retreat. And honestly, there were so many reasons I wanted to go to your retreat, possibly just to hang out with you guys. But also it was so
Absolutely.
beautiful and fantastic. Um, but I retreats are retreats are a complicated subject for me. I volunteered with an organization in the States for about 10 years or so that put on
Wow.
youth retreats. And I did a lot of them, maybe 15 or 20 over the course of 10 or 12 years. And I have kind of come out of that stage of my life recognizing that retreats can be quite manipulative if done the wrong way. They can really not leave space for different personalities. So I'm glad that you said that, Denise. Like, we're all wired differently, and retreat needs to look different for different people, right?
Right.
And so that was part of what I wanted to see, was like, okay, what are different organizations doing that I like? What are they doing that I don't like? What do I see resonating? What do I see not resonating? What feels healthy? What doesn't feel healthy? And I kind of just went into it with eyes open and hands open and said, what do you have for me to experience in this, Lord? And what are you doing in my own heart? By the time I got to Italy, I was pretty sure that actually I wasn't going to end up doing retreats, but I was there anyway, which is great. And I'm so glad that I was. I had started the spiritual direction program that I'm still in right now, which is the same one that Danielle graduated from a few years ago. So that was a sweet connection too. But I went in quite tired and with a lot of questions about what the future held for me and held for my ministry. I had been to another retreat in the fall that I found lovely in some ways, but definitely not what I wanted to replicate. I found a lot of that kind of manipulation is a strong word, but it was very like emotion driven, very there was kind of a FOMO about the whole thing. Like, we've got hairstylists and we've got massage therapists and we've got therapists and we've got spiritual directors, and you should fill your time with all these things that you can do, which is like amazing. If you haven't had a haircut in a year, you can go get one. But for me, I needed like a lot of quiet and a lot of space, and I didn't get it. And I left very, very tired from that retreat. So I thought, that's not what I want to do. But I was so interested to see what you all had created, because I love the thoughtfulness of the retreats that you had created online before, and how spacious they are, and how they really just can be tailored to what people need. And I just was very, very excited to see how that played out in an in-person setting. And I just remember being at the very end of the retreat and thinking to myself, I have no notes about this. Like, I have no notes. This was so beautiful and perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing about how this retreat went and how it was structured and the messages, and it just was the perfect experience. I hope everyone that's listening can go, even if you can't go this time, that you can go someday, because it is just so well done. The Velvet Ashes. I mean, your team, you guys have just done a fantastic job crafting an experience that will bless people so much, and allows it to be what people need. There is space for you to take solitude and silence. There's also space for you to play games at night if you want, but no one cares if you go to bed. Casa Cares is so gorgeous and such a lovely place to have a retreat. Florence is my favorite city now. And
oh, yes.
Like, please just let me go there every year. And I just left that space. Well, I left that space with COVID, but that's a different story.
That's right, you did.
We were so
oh my
sick.
goodness, Karli, you were so sick.
I was so sick. I was so sick. But I left just feeling so, I felt the Father's love for me so deeply and so intimately in ways that I hadn't in a really long time. Yeah. And that's very, very special. It's very special. And I think it speaks a lot to how you all allow the Father to work through you and the work that you do, and how you create spaces for women to feel the Lord's love for them.
Oh, Karli, thank you so much for saying all of those wonderful things. Honestly, we felt the retreat was so special. We didn't know what to expect. I mean, we hoped that it would translate into a group being able to feel that intimate moment and personalized retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And we left feeling so full and just
Yeah.
praying that the Lord would allow us to be able to do it again. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, in 2024, we had every intention of doing that. And
Mm.
we couldn't make it happen with the underwriting that we were able to with the first. And so we were just, Lord, what would you have us do? And we as a team got together and said, you know what? We feel like this is something that we want to make available to our community every year. And so
Mm.
we just are doing whatever it takes to make this happen again in 25. And we hope that it's something we can do again. And
Mm.
it's such an intimate thing. There were several things that we wanted to have happen. And that was, we have the entire place to ourselves. You
Yeah.
know, that there are those spaces where you are in big hotels and convention centers,
Mm-hmm.
but it was important to us to have the entire place. And we felt like in Italy, we found that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we also, when we were combing for the exact right location for the budget that we knew all of our, you know, community, even us, you know, wanted to keep that budget in mind. But you find that places that cater to cross-cultural workers sometimes have really unbeautiful things about them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
everybody can picture with me the plastic chairs that you see all over, at least in Africa, you know, and that was
Yes.
like whenever we got to, we were looking and virtually touring places, it was like all of those. And I'm like, those are so practical, but I really feel like there's a beauty that I want to be present. And we
Mm.
felt like we found, I loved how the people at Casa Caras described the place as it's like your grandmother's living room, your
Yeah.
Italian grandmother's living room. And I'm like,
Mm.
yes, exactly. It's not
Mm-hmm.
modern. It's not over the top. It is
Yep.
cozy Italian
Yep.
grandmother.
Yep.
And, um, can I tell you my favorite moment?
Mm.
Okay. Two of them as it pertains to you. Our
Okay.
team got there a few days early and we were all in the airport,
Yep.
little airport in Florence. And all of a sudden here walks Karli out of the, you know, airport waiting area. And we're like, oh, we'd only seen each other online. And here
Yeah.
we are a few days early wandering into each other in Italy
Yep.
unexpectedly. And it was like,
Yep.
Karli, is that you?
Yes.
And you had come a few days
So
early to
fun.
take in Florence before the
Mm-hmm.
retreat, thank goodness, since you got sick after.
Oh gosh. Yes.
And then my other favorite memory was there was a train strike. I don't know if you remember this, but on
Mm-hmm.
our first retreat, we had given people all of these, okay, get to Florence, and then it is a train ride to get out to this villa. And of course, that was the day that the trains went on strike. And so it was like, how are all of these women who have flown in going to actually get out to the retreat site? And so we decided to charter a bus. And so all of these women who had flown from different parts of the world got to get on one bus together in Florence and take this 45-minute bus ride to the villa. And you became a community on that bus. And our
Mm.
team was waiting at the entrance as the bus stopped and you guys all got out and you were laughing and hugging each other and smiling. And you had already on that short bus ride
Mm.
became fast friends and community.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how you began the retreat. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of my favorite memories is just all of those smiles and hugs of everybody getting off of the bus to begin this special time together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Mm.
so grateful for you sharing about your experience with that. And we're so excited that that we get to open it up to 24 more women to experience this with us with
Mm-hmm.
registration open now. So um, but you came into that, you mentioned with your spiritual director training
Mm-hmm.
and getting that process. What where are you at with that now? And what's that looking like as you minister?
Yeah, it looks a couple different ways. Like I said, I'm wearing a couple different hats right now, and it's getting a little crazy. So I am seeing directees for private spiritual direction, which I love. I still have a year to go in the program that I'm doing, but they do ask us to start practicing now. And I really love it. It's a beautiful mix of other women that are serving cross culturally and um, some women also that are living in the US that are people that I've gotten connected to from friends there. But it is a space that I find myself in where every time I end a call, I think, this is what God created me to do.
Mm.
It is so, it's just so life-giving and such a privilege to get to walk with women in that space. And especially women serving abroad. It's just really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
The second way that that looks is I was just asked to be the deputy director of wellness for our sending organization. So in addition to serving as a regional director for Africa, I'm now working alongside the director of wellness to essentially create this team of people. It's a new team for our organization that's doing kind of a cross between member care and soul care, but also with like crisis management and really taking a lot of the things that I've been observing, you know, throughout all of the different people that I've been connected with globally and taking it and saying, okay, how do we do this well within our one organization? So it's a lot. If I had to make like a summary of how the Lord has been working in the last year or two, it's been a lot of him taking ministries that were very big and very broad and asking me to take that same heart and kind of hone it in on serve this one woman who's walking and serving in Kenya or is walking and serving in Ireland, or take these visions that you had, things like retreats, things like soul care spaces, and create those just for your organization. So not that it won't ever happen for Third Culture Thriving, but for this season, I'm seeing those dreams come to fruition in other ways. And it's really a privilege.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we're also really excited about is that you still are a writer for Velvet Ashes. And so our community gets to hear from you in a personal way frequently. And one of those is this month, our theme on Velvet Ashes is complicated. And you, depending on when people are listening to this, you know, maybe you can read right now Karli's blog that she wrote. But one of the things we chose the topic complicated is because it is complicated to sit in this space as a cross-cultural woman. And one of the things you talk about, which I would love to just touch on real quickly here, is that you mentioned, is it okay to not love the place that you're at? And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about fleshing that out for, you know, what if you're serving in a place and can you say that you aren't absolutely in love with the country and all of the things that come with where you serve? And is that okay to say that, you know, as a serving cross-culturally?
Yeah, it was a conversation that was coming up for me a lot for one reason or another in the last couple of months. And so then when Sarah sent out the theme, it was the first thing that came to mind, because so many of my complicated things involve either like my kids and feeling complicated about having my kids abroad, or they involve trauma. And we've just like talked about that in other spaces. But what felt complicated for me was, man, I have complicated feelings about this country. And I think, Sarah, even when I sent it to you, I said, like, I don't know if this really fits the theme, but we're going to go for it. And Sarah had said that it was okay. So here we are. Someone asked me over the summer, you know, you've been in Rwanda for 8.5 years now. You must really love it. And I said, no, I don't like, but let me explain. And that's why, you know, it's a complicated answer, right? I love my life here. I love the work that I get to do here. I am deeply content here, deeply content. And that is a gift from God, because that certainly was not always the case. Do I love everything about living in Rwanda? No, I really don't. There are a lot of things about living in this country that are extremely hard. And it comes with a lot of baggage. It comes with a lot of complication. And I think at some point, whether this was just me or whether many of us move abroad with this mindset, I think I thought that my obedience was going to be rewarded with this deep love, this feeling of like, I'm going to step off the plane and I'm going to feel like I'm home. And like, this is the missing piece of what I didn't know I needed. And I think that happens for some people. Like I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and that was how she felt when she landed here. And that's beautiful. And I'm so grateful that that was true for her. But it hasn't been for me. And yet, I'm supposed to be here. I love living here. I love the work that I get to have. I love my Rwandese friends. Like, I love the Rwandese in my church community. I love many parts of Africa, but I don't have this deep, like, Rwanda is the best. I've just been waiting all my life to come into this country and have this like huge place in my heart. Like it's obedience. It's obedience and it's sacrifice. And the reward for that obedience isn't this deep love. It's contentment. It's contentment and it's peace in knowing that we're serving in the way that the Lord wants us to serve.
Yeah.
And that's complicated.
It is complicated. Karli, I can't thank you enough for the space that you fill in our community on abroad, whether that is here at Velvet Ashes or the broader women serving cross-cultural community. We are so blessed by you. So thank you for being open and for allowing the Holy Spirit to use your gifts and to use your life to encourage women all over the field. So thank you so much for showing up. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited for women to hear this. I hope that whether you push play and listen to the whole thing or you break it up in chunks over your month, I hope that you listen to every single bit of what Karli had to share with you this month. We are so glad to be here, Karli, with you on the Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast.
Thank you. It's a real gift. Thanks for thinking of me and inviting me in. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to be even a little part of what Velvet Ashes is doing. It's so important and it's so needed in this life abroad. And I'm just grateful for each of you.
Oh, thank you. And we're anxiously awaiting all that Third Culture Thriving has for us in the podcast world. And everybody, we're always blessed that we get to share the space with you once a month here on Velvet Ashes. Thanks for joining us for season 3. And we always want to say thank you to Barnabas International for sponsoring our podcast. And we look forward to being here with you next month on the Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast.
What a pleasure to be home. God, what a treasure to be found.